Hi there, Chris from TotallyEV, and here I'm doing a dedicated audio review of the Peugeot 408. If you want a detailed review of the vehicle itself, more specifically the plug-in hybrid, do check it up on your pop-up banner, down the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, to kick off this video, I do have to talk about its audio configuration. And here, as standard across the entire trim range, you'll find a 6-speaker setup. Here you have got 165mm woofers found within each of the 4 doors and 25mm tweeters found within each of the A-pillars. If, however, you want to up the ante, you're going to have to go for the GT trim and then add a £600 option to get the Focal audio system. Now, this will take the tally up to 10 speakers, whereby you have got a center driver, tweeters that are found within each of the rear doors, and also a subwoofer. Now, this gives you a total power output of 690 watts. Indeed, the power output has not been shared by the manufacturer for the stock audio system. Nonetheless, this is the audio system that is on review, and I'll be seeing if it's actually worth its price tag. Now, if you do want to tinker around with the audio drivers, at least in the Focal audio system, you'll want to navigate on the 10-inch display. Here you'll find treble and bass settings, and you'll also find a mid-range setting as well, which is certainly appreciated. Now, in my case, I've actually added 4 notches to treble, and then as for the speaker settings, I've added 2 notches to the central speaker and 2 notches to subwoofer. Of course, this is all very subjective, so make sure you share your own EQ settings if you have this vehicle down in the comment section below. Now, for you to connect up to the infotainment system, you have got Bluetooth, but this is limited to the lowest quality SBC codec, which is quite disheartening. But thankfully, you can connect up via wired or wireless connection to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is certainly appreciated, and therefore will give you the best sort of audio fidelity, and is certainly what I would recommend. So moving swiftly on, we get onto cabin noise, and here the sound measurements that were recorded by myself using a sound meter will be on your screen. Indeed, over here the 408 actually does a pretty good job, both at slower and higher speeds. It is very much on par with its sibling, the Citroën C5X Hybrid. Now, it's worth pointing out that I am sat in the GT trim, and that is quite important because in the Allure Premium and the GT trim, not only will you have a acoustically treated windscreen, but you'll also have laminated front windows, which obviously adds to the overall serene environment that one can attain. So something worth considering, that if you do want a little bit more of that quieter cabin, you might want to go for the Allure Premium or indeed the GT trim. Now, aside from that, I will want to give you a quick audio demo. It's not going to be ideal using my microphones, nor is it going to be ideal over YouTube, but I'll give you a little bit of a taster. I'll be placing the camera and the microphone in 4 separate locations and playing back a track. It's from Priya J and it's titled Like Me. Now, I appreciate an audio demo over YouTube isn't quite ideal, so let me get on to my subjective opinion. Now, first off, in terms of a sub-bass rumble, it can certainly be heard and felt, and that is because you've got a dedicated subwoofer in the Focal audio system, something that's emitted altogether in the normal audio system, so certainly something that you might want to consider upgrading to. Now, I do find its naming quite funny. It's called a triple voice coil power flower subwoofer. I'm not really sure who came up with this, but nonetheless, it does do its job. Now, it's worth pointing out that if you compare it to more expensive audio systems out there on the market, the power flower subwoofer won't quite compete. It doesn't deliver that extended rumble, but it still does provide some degree of low-end extension, specifically if you EQ it by a few notches into the infotainment system, and in this respect, I added 2 notches. Now, as for its mid-bass, I've actually not got many complaints. It doesn't have that sort of perfect quality, but the amount of quantity is certainly there. Even in terms of its default EQ, I found to be actually pretty excited when I was listening to my favorite R&B, EDM and DnB tracks. Both at the front and rear of the cabin, the mid-range / woofer drivers that are found within each of the 4 doors do a decent job. Now, the same praise, however, couldn't be said about its mid-range. The vocals just feel a bit too subdued, pushed back, and just feel a little bit odd. So much so that I was tempted to take 1 notch off the mid-range EQ via the infotainment system, but by doing so, it added a little bit more of that excessive V-shaped sound signature. So in this respect, I left it in terms of its default EQ, but then just realized that if I were to add more notches on, so go in terms of a positive sign, then I'd find that the overall audio quality and in terms of the overall reference sound would go completely out the window, and therefore I'd get a sort of veiled artificial mid-range tone. So in this respect, I just left it in terms of its default EQ and just accepted that I've got a somewhat V-shaped sound signature, which won't be exactly too bad for certain individuals, but for those people who just want to hear male or female vocals come to fruition, that isn't quite the case in the 408, or at least not in the Focal audio system, which is quite disheartening. Now, as for the highs, they extend actually pretty well, both at the front and rear of the cabin, and that's due to the fact that you've got dedicated tweeters, indeed within the A-pillars at the front, and then at the rear, you have got them integrated within each of the rear doors. So finally we get onto its soundstage, and frankly I've been left a little bit disappointed. Now granted, you do have 2 additional audio drivers at the rear of the cabin and a center speaker which can be customized via the infotainment system in comparison to the standard audio setup. But still, the Focal audio system does feel a little bit lackluster. It lacks that overall engagement and the overall width and depth, and also that instrument separation in comparison to more premium audio systems out there. Still, in comparison to the standard audio system, the Focal system will give you a little bit more of that extra bit of liveliness, be it if you're sat at the front or indeed at the rear. And as a result, I can give it our Approved Audio Award. Now, it's worth considering that if you are looking at the 408 and you're a bit of an audiophile or someone that enjoys listening to their music, then you might seriously want to consider getting the GT trim and then adding the £600 option for the Focal audio system. If, however, you're not too much into your audio, the 6-speaker audio system will suffice, and therefore for most consumers will just leave them with a smile on their face because of its overall hearty sound signature. The same could have been said about its sibling, the Citroën C5X Hybrid. Now I'd be curious to know what you make of the audio system, be it if you've heard it or indeed owned the vehicle, down in the comment section below. And of course, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.